Prime Minister Anthony Albanese pushes the yes case for the voice referendum as US political heavyweights announce a visit to Australia. The Women's Football World Cup kicks off tonight amid criticism of FIFA's failure to capitalise commercially on the event. And Barbenheimer, with a little Mission Impossible as well, set to save cinemas. Welcome to Fear and Greed Business News, Australia's best business podcast. It's Thursday, the 20th of July, 2023. I'm Michael Thompson, and good morning, Sean Aylmer.
Good morning, Michael. Excited about the show today. Plenty in it.
Oh, there's some fantastic stories, and I can't wait to talk to you about, of all things, movies later in the episode. After the show, though, you've got a terrific chat for anyone interested in investing. Tobias Yao, the portfolio manager at Wilson Asset Management, or WAM.
Yeah, so Tobias is across four of WAM's listed investment companies, WAM Capital, Microcap Research and Active. We talked to him about why small caps are in for a good time. They've had a pretty rough time compared to large caps, and he tells us why. But looking forward, Tobias is pretty upbeat. He also gives us a few ideas if you're interested in investing.
Yeah, it is a good chat. It's coming up later on. The main story this morning, Sean, with Australians soon to receive a pamphlet with both the yes and no cases for the Voice to Parliament referendum. Prime Minister Anthony Albanese was on the hustings yesterday, insisting that the vote will pass.
Yes, he's getting a little tetchy about it, I would say. The Prime Minister ruled out changes to the Voice to Parliament referendum question and got a bit short with the Sydney radio interviewer when the DJ said the Prime Minister was putting some Australians ahead of others. The Prime Minister's response was, and I quote, "Talking about Indigenous Australians having special rights ignores the fact that this is the most disadvantaged group. There's an 8-year life expectancy gap, and there is a greater chance of an Indigenous young man going to jail than going to university." Albanese said the Voice could not lobby the Reserve Bank over interest rates because the bank is independent of government. He also ruled out reparations for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Australians. Now, away from the Voice, Albanese expressed his disappointment in the decline of the public service and said his government is committed to reducing its reliance on major consulting firms. Obviously, this is in the wake of the PwC debacle. Albanese said a culture shift within the public service had resulted in a trend where officials regularly refer questions put to them to consultancies rather than working out the answers themselves.
And Sean, US Secretary of State Antony Blinken and Secretary of Defence Lloyd Austin will travel to Brisbane for the annual Australia-United States Ministerial Consultations meeting next week.
Sure will. And then Deputy Prime Minister Richard Marles will travel with Austin to North Queensland to observe Australian and US military personnel taking part in exercises. The talks will consider ways to deepen collaboration across defence and security, climate and clean energy, and economic resilience. Marles said that Australia will continue to work with partners, including the United States, to build a region that is peaceful, stable and prosperous, including through the long-standing US Force Posture initiatives in Australia. That's what's going on next week.
All right, a couple of big political stories. Now, how did local markets perform yesterday?
The S&P ASX 200 closed up 0.6% to 7,324 points. It's the highest close in a month. Now, the major banks led the way. ANZ, Westpac and Commonwealth Bank all rose close to 2%. The energy companies did pretty well. The big three miners, BHP, Fortescue Metals and Rio Tinto, not so much. They all ended lower. The retailers were mixed. Telstra was lower, while the tech and real estate sectors did okay as well. In corporate news, investors liked Ampol's latest trading update, pushing its share price up 4.6%. Fuel sales are up, so too profit margins at its Lytton oil refinery in Queensland. And Australia's second largest gold digger, Northern Star, said this financial year might not be as good as expected. That sent its share price down nearly 6%. It was the worst of the top 200.
And international markets, what's going on?
Wall Street is reasonably upbeat at the moment. We've had some early results in the June quarter earnings season. They've been pretty good. The banks traditionally come out early and they haven't been too bad at all. There's also growing expectations that the world's largest economy will end up with a soft landing, as in the economy will slow but not go into recession. That's helping Wall Street. Plenty of news around wheat prices at the moment. They spiked this week after Russia said it's pulling out from a wartime agreement to allow grain exports from Ukraine to travel through the Black Sea. Now, Ukraine is one of the world's top grain and vegetable oil exporters, and the corridor shutdown is expected to hit a bunch of key buyers like China, Spain, Egypt. Wheat prices reached a high about 14 months ago thanks to Russia's invasion of Ukraine. They've trended lower ever since, at least until this week. Otherwise, Michael, oil has held on to its gains and Brent crude is trading just under $80 a barrel. Gold is higher. Iron ore prices have rebounded a bit over the past week or so, and the Aussie dollar is buying around 68 US cents.
All right, there's a bit happening. Sean, we talked yesterday and the day before as well about you moderating the great debate at the Mumbrella 360 conference yesterday. How did it all go?
It was good. It was the independent agencies at first, the in-house agencies versus the network agencies. Spirited debate. It was all about who's best, effectively. Well, that's what it boiled down to. And in the end, the vote was decided by a clapathon, as in the audience response.
Old school.
Yeah, very old school. The network agencies won, but as the independent agencies and in-house guys pointed out, one of the benefits of a network agency is you have a lot of people at a conference like the Mumbrella 360. Hence, not surprising that they got the biggest cheer.
Are you saying it was rigged?
No, I was moderator. I would never allow it to be rigged, Michael.
Oh, good. Okay, sorry. And speaking of Mumbrella, Sean, there is a new episode of Mumbrella Cast, which is the Mumbrella podcast, out. I believe it came out yesterday. And it features
Couple of dodgy characters.
Yes, us. And it's all about kind of a bit of the backstory to Fear and Greed. So it might be worth a little bit of a listen.
If you listen to us regularly, you might like to hear how we came about.
And not kind of right at the beginning of our lives because...
No. I tried to go down there, but they cut me off.
All right, we'll be back in a moment with the rest of the day's business news. Sean, Federal Education Minister Jason Clare yesterday announced a raft of potential changes to the higher education system in an effort to increase the number of students from underrepresented groups enrolled in university.
The Interim Universities Accord report that came out yesterday that Jason Clare outlined hopes that changes can increase the number of students at university from about 900,000 now to 1.8 million by 2050. The review put forward about 70 ideas to improve the system. One of the big ones is a universal learning entitlement that will help more Australians get qualifications and ensure students from disadvantaged groups are eligible for a funded place at university. A new needs-based funding model for Commonwealth-supported places is also proposed that would add additional support to students from those underrepresented groups. The review also proposes putting a levy on international student fee income to create a fund, something like a sovereign wealth fund, but it would have a mandate to protect the sector from future economic shocks and help fund infrastructure, research and student housing. It'll be very interesting to see how this one plays out.
Yeah, it certainly will be. And late on Tuesday evening, Federal Treasurer Jim Chalmers held a meeting with China's finance minister. He's the first treasurer in 4 years to meet his Chinese counterpart.
Chalmers said good progress was made in the 1 hour meeting. The two discussed the global and domestic economic outlooks, while the detention of 2 Australian writers in China was raised. Chalmers also noted that Beijing recently lifted trade bans on Australian coal and timber. He said he conveyed our enthusiasm to remove duties on other things like barley, wine and lobster.
Sean, Rio Tinto's iron ore division has achieved its most productive first half in 5 years and hopes to ship around 330 million tonnes of iron ore this year. Isn't that extraordinary?
330 million tonnes. It's not that far off. 1 million tonnes a day.
Oh, wow.
I just can't even fathom how big that is. People who have been out, particularly to the Pilbara and seen these operations, they just say until you see them, you do not appreciate the size and the scale. It's just 330 million tonnes of iron ore this year.
That's big. That's got to be good news.
It is good news. The bad news was that a train derailment meant exports were soft for 3 months to the end of June. Mind you, the first 3 months of this year, they were very, very strong. Now, Rio's share price ended down 0.8% yesterday. While Rio's iron ore division is doing well, the country's third largest miner downgraded output forecasts for copper and alumina. Rio kicks off the June half-year profit reporting season next week. It's always one of the first to go. It's expected to have made around $10 billion for the June half.
Now, Woodside Energy CEO Meg O'Neill has had another crack, Sean, at the federal government over its gas policy, including caps on prices and the safeguard mechanism.
O'Neill said prospective customers of Australian LNG now have doubts about the certainty of cargoes. She said she's at a conference last week, and that's what people were asking her. O'Neill added that a mandatory code of conduct for gas producers on the East Coast, finalised by the Albanese government last week, is workable. She was speaking after Woodside posted a 29% dive in quarterly sales, its worst quarter since merging with BHP Petroleum in June last year. Much of that reflected lower prices. Woodside this week also said there were cost blowouts and delays at its oil project in Senegal. All in all, the oil and gas producer's share price rose 1.4% yesterday.
Victorian Premier Daniel Andrews spent much of yesterday defending his decision to drop the Commonwealth Games in regional Victoria, saying it was never an option to hold the event in Melbourne.
There's not many stories this year that there's been so much vitriol pushed towards one individual.
Yeah, I think that's right. And kind of from the moment it came out, the response was instant and massive.
Yeah. Now, they probably, Victoria probably should have never put their hand up for it until they had done the numbers properly, but no one else is putting their hands up to hold the Commonwealth Games. There was some talk that Scotland was interested, but that's gone quiet as well. Anyway, the Commonwealth Games Federation had previously said the reason for the massive cost blowout of holding the Games from more than $2 billion to about $6 or $7 billion was the fact that they are due to be held in rural Victoria, or at least they were due to be held in rural Victoria. Daniel Andrews is sticking to his guns, though. He said the money is better spent on housing and hospitals. Asked whether the decision could be compared to an episode of ABC's comedy Utopia, a visibly irritated Andrews, he said people could draw whatever parallels they liked, but it's going to appear on it.
Absolutely. It's inevitable, isn't it?
Yeah.
Now, Sean, speaking of big sporting events, the Women's Football World Cup kicks off tonight with 1.5 million people expected to attend the games across Australia and New Zealand, and a global TV audience of 2 billion. Wow.
Yeah, it's pretty good. We had the first games at 5 p.m. Australian time in New Zealand. It's New Zealand versus Norway, I think, and then Australia takes on Ireland later on tonight. Sam Kerr, of course, is leading the Australians. The build-up locally has been enormous, but last-minute sponsorship deals and fights over broadcasting rights, in part because of the time difference between Europe, North America and Australia, has taken some of the gloss off expected revenue for women's football. FIFA, which is world football's governing body, has been heavily criticised for its handling of commercial negotiations. According to a report in the Financial Times, the Women's World Cup is set to generate just over $300 million in sponsorship revenue for FIFA, although much of that comes from rolling multi-year brand partnerships. The Men's World Cup in Qatar last year brought in total revenue of $6.3 billion.
That is a phenomenal difference.
Mind you, there was also a story in the Fin Review yesterday quoting Nike as saying sales of football jerseys, women's football jerseys, for this World Cup has outsold sales of men's football jerseys for the Qatar World Cup and the period since. So basically these past few weeks, more Australian women's jerseys sold than men for the past 12 months.
Hey, that's a bit of good news.
Yeah, totally.
Oh, nice one. Look, there's no better time actually to mention this before we get into international news. I just need to wrap up something that we discussed briefly yesterday, Sean. And that was we were discussing data, and you said data and I said data. And we said we'll probably never agree on which one it was. Anyway, listeners had a point of view on that. And we heard quite a bit via the various social media platforms. And this one came in from Ivan via Facebook. And he said, look, hi guys, data versus data. My auntie was a primary school teacher and took great pleasure constantly correcting my grammar. And look, he goes into some detail about it. But it can all boil down into one line in the message from him. Either way, Sean was wrong.
Ivan, you've made my day.
That was just glorious. Anyway, I just had to share that. Sorry, I didn't know when to do it, and I figured no, it's never a good time to tell someone that they were wrong.
Ivan, you are such a Michael Thompson man. It disappoints.
Oh,
anyway.
It is glorious. I'm the man of the people, and Ivan is one of those people. There we go. International news time now, Sean. Donald Trump yesterday said he is the target of a criminal probe into efforts to overturn the results of the 2020 US presidential election, raising the possibility that he could face fresh federal charges in the coming days.
Trump described the development as horrifying after receiving a letter from the Department of Justice informing him he was a target of an investigation into the run-up to the January 6, 2021 attack on the US Capitol. Trump said the letter from Special Counsel Jack Smith, who is handling the investigation, had given him a very short 4 days to report to the grand jury, which almost always means an arrest and indictment. Fresh criminal charges would deepen the legal risks facing Trump as he campaigns for another term as president. Last month, federal prosecutors unsealed an indictment charging him with 37 criminal counts relating to his handling of classified government documents. The indictment, filed days after Trump announced he had received a letter from the Department of Justice, was also brought by Smith. He is not going to get a Christmas card from Donald Trump, Jack Smith. Trump has promised to press on with his campaign despite these mounting legal challenges.
Sean, iconic London department store Harrods will open a new private members club in Shanghai, the first of its kind outside the UK, in a bid to tap into resilient demand from ultra-wealthy Chinese consumers.
I love this story. So the new club is called The Residence and will open at the end of this year on the second floor of a central Shanghai heritage building where a Harrods tea room and bar, which are open to the public, are already located. British celebrity chef Gordon Ramsay's first restaurant in the city will be housed inside the club. Annual fees will be about 150,000 yuan, which is about $30,000, according to Bloomberg. Resident members will also be able to collect rare bottles of alcohol through Harrods' partnership with premier Scottish whisky company Edrington Group, and they'll also have access to the store's global concierge services. It'll accept about 250 members to start. That's exclusive, Michael.
That is very exclusive. Now, Sean mentioned this one at the top of the show. Barbenheimer has hit the world. I don't know about this. Moviegoers are watching the two big movies of the Northern Summer, Barbie, starring Australia's own Margot Robbie, and Oppenheimer, starring Cillian Murphy. And they're opening on the same day.
Yeah, so AMC Entertainment, the world's largest movie chain, says more than 20,000 of its AMC Stubs members have already booked Barbie and Oppenheimer on the same day. UK cinema chain View says that as of Tuesday, 19% of people who booked tickets to see Oppenheimer also bought tickets for Barbie. Again, they're going to see them at the same time. Well, not at the same time, but, within 24 hours. They're not quite of the same genre, these two movies, even if they do hit the big screens today. Both of them are released today. Barbie is a PG-rated comedy that runs just under 2 hours and apparently answers some long-standing questions about Barbie herself. The reviews are great. They really are. Now, Oppenheimer is an R-rated 3-hour dramatic epic. Very different from Barbie. Barbie has outsold Oppenheimer about 2-1. These are pre-sales because obviously the show hasn't started until today. Along with Tom Cruise's latest Mission Impossible, the three are the great hopes of cinema this year. The question, Michael, if you could only see one, Oppenheimer, Barbie, or Mission Impossible, which would you go to?
I wouldn't see Mission Impossible because I've missed a couple in the middle, so you know
Right.
how it's like a sequel. Look, I'd be inclined to see Oppenheimer, except for the fact that it's 3 hours. It shows me that I'm getting old. The first thing that I look up about a movie is its duration.
Oh, no, that's fine, because you can have a sleep in the middle and wake up and just get back into it. It's fine. 3 hours is good.
You don't think you might miss a couple of plot points?
What's interesting, the reviews for Barbie are sensational. 4, 5, 4.5 stars. Really, I would not have seen Barbie, but the reviews are so good. I'm tempted.
Well, we have a video on Instagram today about you weighing up the decision to go, which one you're going to go and see. So jump onto our Fear and Greed Instagram, which is at Fear and Greed Podcast, and check it on out. Sean, we've got to wrap things up. Up next is the Fear and Greed Daily Interview. You're speaking with Tobias Yao, Portfolio Manager at Wilson Asset Management.
All about why it's worth thinking of small caps when you're investing. I think that's probably it in a nutshell.
Yeah, it's coming up next in the Fear and Greed playlist on your podcast platform or at fearandgreed.com.au. Thank you, Sean.
Thank you, Michael.
It's Thursday, the 20th of July, 2023. Make sure you're following the podcast and join us online on LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. I'm Michael Thompson, and that was Fear and Greed Business News. Have a great day.